Suddenly, Hollywood and millions of loyal viewers around the world were struck with a wave of nostalgic sorrow as news broke on May 20th that George Wendt, the beloved actor who brought the iconic character Norm Peterson to life on the legendary sitcom Cheers, had passed away peacefully in his home at the age of 77. The timing of his death felt almost poetic, eerily so, as it fell on the 32nd anniversary of the series' final episode, as if the universe had chosen this precise day to gently close a chapter in television history. For over a decade, George's warm smile, effortless comedic timing, and endearing presence made Norm a household name and a symbol of comfort for millions tuning in weekly. More than just a bar regular with a witty comeback, Norm was, to many, the soul of Cheers. The man who made audiences laugh, sigh, and sometimes tear up, all while seated on his well-worn bar stool. George Wendt was never merely acting. He was Norm, and the two names became virtually inseparable in pop culture memory. As the sun rose that morning, tributes began to flood social media from fellow cast members, fans, and celebrities alike, their messages wrapped in warmth, gratitude, and disbelief. Ted Danson, Kelsey Grammer, and Rhea Perlman each shared deeply personal stories, some funny, others heartbreakingly tender, about George's kindness on set, his humble nature despite his fame, and the unique energy he brought into every room he entered. The hashtags number Goodbye Norm and number George Wendt Forever trended globally within hours, with fans posting decades-old screenshots of Norm's funniest lines, proving just how deeply embedded Wendt was in the cultural DNA of not just one generation, but several. Meanwhile, casual viewers and hardcore fans alike began revisiting old episodes. Their laughter mingled with tears as they watched George deliver his legendary one-liners, unaware at the time of just how timeless his performance would become. Beyond Cheers, Wendt's career was rich and varied. He made memorable appearances in films like Fletch and House, guest starred on dozens of shows from The Simpsons to Saturday Night Live, and even took his talents to the stage, where he performed in everything from Broadway musicals to intimate dramatic plays. Yet it was always Cheers that defined him in the public eye, a legacy he never tried to distance himself from. Instead, he embraced it with a genuine warmth that fans adored, often showing up at conventions, reunions, and interviews with the same unassuming charm he brought to Norm himself. Now, as the industry mourns yet another legend gone too soon, many are struck by the strange symmetry of it all. How George Wendt's final curtain call aligned so precisely with that of the show that made him a star. It's as if Norm himself finally stood up from that bar stool one last time, smiled, and quietly exited the room, leaving behind echoes of laughter and love that will never fade. However, beneath the outpouring of love and nostalgia, a deeper wave of grief rippled through the entertainment industry. One not just rooted in the loss of a beloved actor, but in the recognition of what George Wendt symbolized in a rapidly changing world. As tributes poured in, so did stories that revealed a bittersweet contrast between the comforting simplicity of Cheers and the complexity of today's fame. In an age of fleeting stardom and digital facades, Wendt represented an authenticity rarely seen anymore. He never courted scandal, never trended for the wrong reasons, and never tried to reinvent himself for relevancy. He didn't need to. His talent was enduring, his humor disarming, and his presence reassuring. Yet, this very authenticity made his loss more painful. Younger actors and comedians began speaking out, not just to honor George, but to express their fear that performers like him, grounded, generous, and genuinely collaborative, were becoming an endangered species in a Hollywood increasingly driven by virality and spectacle. One anonymous Emmy-winning writer shared on X, formerly Twitter, how Wendt once stayed after a guest appearance for hours, chatting with junior staffers, giving advice, and even helping move props for a final take. He treated everyone like they mattered. The tweet read, "You don't see that much anymore." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, long-standing efforts to organize a proper Cheers reunion began to resurface in the wake of his death. For years, attempts had been quietly made to bring the cast together for one final televised tribute, but schedules, legal issues, and personal differences had gotten in the way. Now, suddenly, there was a collective realization that time was no longer on their side. "We always thought we'd have more time," one network executive admitted off-record. "Losing George was a wake-up call. We missed our chance." That sentiment echoed across fan forums and podcast retrospectives, where viewers lamented the idea that the last true Norm moment had passed without fanfare. The weight of that lost opportunity became its own kind of heartbreak. Compounding the grief was the quiet revelation, confirmed by family members, that Wendt had been battling a slow-progressing illness in recent years, one he chose to keep private. There had been whispers, his infrequent public appearances, a noticeable frailty in recent photos. But true to his nature, George never sought sympathy or spotlight. He simply lived, loved, and worked until the very end, embodying the humility that defined him both on and off screen. He didn't want the world to see him fade, a close friend shared, because he wanted to be remembered laughing. So, even as the public celebrated his life, there was an undercurrent of sorrow that extended beyond the individual. It was a mourning for an era, a style of storytelling, and a kind of television that had offered comfort without needing spectacle. In George Wendt, we didn't just lose Norm. We lost one of the last remaining threads that tied modern pop culture to a golden age of sitcoms where humanity, humor, and heart came first. Then, as the days unfolded and tributes transformed into memorials, the emotional crescendo reached its peak when fans, colleagues, and an entire generation collectively paused to reflect. Not just on George Wendt's career, but on the personal connections they felt to him, to Norm, and to the world of Cheers. A special candlelight vigil was organized outside the former Bull and Finch pub in Boston, the real-life inspiration for the Cheers bar. What began as a modest fan tribute soon evolved into a massive, tear-filled gathering as hundreds showed up with handwritten notes, vintage memorabilia, and even pint glasses inscribed with Norm's famous lines. Some fans traveled across the country to be there, driven not by celebrity worship, but by genuine affection for a man who, to them, had become a part of their lives. Someone who sat with them in their loneliest nights and brought laughter when they needed it most. At the heart of the event was an impromptu speech by Rhea Perlman, who stood before the crowd and, through tears, shared stories of George's fierce loyalty and his unique ability to make everyone feel seen. "He made you feel like you belonged," she said, even when the cameras weren't rolling. The speech was streamed live on multiple platforms, viewed by millions, and clipped into viral moments within hours. Across television networks, programming shifted to feature marathon replays of Cheers. And during one emotional break, Ted Danson appeared on screen, visibly shaken, simply saying, "Norm wasn't just a character. He was George's heart, and ours." Meanwhile, younger comedians and actors, many of whom had never met Wendt personally, began sharing how his work had inspired them. On TikTok, heartfelt sketches and tribute monologues exploded in popularity, turning into a viral wave that introduced Norm Peterson to Gen Z audiences who'd never seen a full episode of Cheers. Ironically, in his passing, George was becoming more relevant than ever, a bridge between past and present, reminding everyone what timeless comedy and human connection truly looked like. Even Jimmy Fallon paused his late-night routine for a raw, unscripted segment about how watching Norm with his father shaped his dream of working in comedy. And yet, perhaps the most profound moment came from an unexpected place. An unreleased podcast interview recorded just a few months before George's death. In it, he spoke softly about legacy, saying, "If people remember me with a smile, then I did my job. That's really all there is." Those words, simple and sincere, hit like a thunderclap. They were replayed endlessly, on news segments, tribute videos, and in the minds of every fan who had ever laughed with Norm. In that instant, George Wendt wasn't just an actor. He was a guidepost in a chaotic world, a reminder of the power of joy, decency, and quiet resilience. This was the emotional climax not only of a life well lived, but of a culture recognizing its need to reconnect with the kind of values and warmth he represented. His death wasn't just mourned, it was felt deeply by everyone who ever wished they had a Norm in their life. Eventually, the storm of emotion began to settle, giving way to a quieter, more reflective wave of remembrance, as the industry and fans alike sought to preserve George Wendt's legacy in meaningful ways. Though the spontaneous tributes had already etched his memory into digital eternity, more deliberate efforts emerged. NBC announced plans for a primetime tribute special titled Norm, The Last Call, featuring cast reunions, never-before-seen behind-the-scenes footage, and interviews with comedians, writers, and cultural historians who would trace Wendt's influence far beyond the barstools of Cheers. Museums like the Smithsonian began discussions about acquiring Wendt-related memorabilia, not just his wardrobe from the show, but also handwritten scripts, personal notes, and one of the actual stools from the set, which had quietly sat in his home for decades. In Chicago, George's hometown, a local theater renamed its main stage in his honor, citing his roots in the city's famous Second City Improv troupe, where he learned the very skills that would make Norm so unforgettable. Meanwhile, fans launched petitions to have May 20th officially recognized as Norm Day, a symbolic gesture to celebrate everyday heroes who bring joy to others, just as George did with such effortless charm. Across social media, a new trend quietly spread. People sharing photos of themselves at bars, dinner tables, or family gatherings, raising a glass and captioning it simply, "For Norm." But beyond all the formal tributes and collective gestures, the most powerful legacy remained deeply personal. In homes across the world, people revisited episodes of Cheers, not just for laughs, but for comfort. Watching Norm walk through those doors and be greeted by name reminded them of a time when TV felt like home, when characters weren't just actors, but companions through life's chaos. In a world where entertainment often feels disposable, George Wendt's work endured because it was never about ego or flash. It was about connection. Slowly, that realization began to shape a new conversation in Hollywood, with showrunners, writers, and young performers asking themselves how to create with the kind of integrity Wendt modeled. Could they bring back the long-form, character-driven sitcoms that allowed actors to evolve on screen, to grow old with their audiences, to matter more than algorithms? George's passing had sparked more than just sorrow. It ignited a longing for substance in a world saturated with spectacle. And in the end, perhaps that's what made his story so remarkable. George Wendt never chased the spotlight. He never needed to. He stood in the same place, on a bar stool, in our memories, and let the world come to him. And when it did, it stayed. His final bow wasn't marked by fireworks or final words. It was marked by the stillness that follows a deep, genuine laugh, the kind that lingers, the kind that stays with you, the kind that, like George, never truly fades.